Good to go? Okay. Thank you for joining us for our first episode of the 2025 Pick North Football Show. We'd like to kick off this week's show thanking our new sponsors. First off, Cardo's Pizza and Tavern for hosting our weekly show. Keith, the owner here, has been outstanding to work with. He's also shares the name Keith with me, so he's already good in my book. They're located here at 7897 Refugee Road in the Kroger Shopping Center right across the street from Pickerington North High School. Cardo's is a perfect place to take your family for a pregame meal for any North athletic event or just going out for the family on the weekends. Our second sponsor, the American Legion Post 283, also across the street from Pick North, huge supporters of the football program. Join the American Legion Post 283 for steak night, August 29th, 6 to 8 p.m. They have a 10-ounce strip steak dinner just for $18 per plate. Pretty good value. Refugee Road, right across the street from Pickerington North High School, and it's open to the public, too. Our final sponsor, Peterson Home Building, LLC, your trusted partner for roof repair and restoration solutions in Central Ohio. Peterson is committed to delivering top-quality craftsmanship and exceptional customer service to safeguard your most valuable investment with integrity and precision. Contact Peterson Home Building at 614-549-9596. So we'll go ahead and get started tonight. We'll kick off our Week 1 show with our head coach, Nate Hillridge. Nate, thank you for joining us. And we know it's a busy week with St. Ed's and everything else going on, so really thanks for taking some time out.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to be here. Excited to have this show back again for the second year, so it should be fun.
No, thanks for having us. So Coach Hillridge, he enters his 9th year as the head coach here at Pickerington North, carrying a 66-28 record. Nate enters this season only 5 wins short of breaking former head coach Tom Phillips' all-time win record of 70 wins with the Panthers. Nate, how the heck have you already been here 9 years? I mean, you were telling me a story about one of your freshmen today. Tell us that story.
Yeah, you know, it's crazy. Time flies, and we just had our Meet the Team on Sunday, and it's pretty cool. You start looking back at pictures with all the technology, and you know, there's kids in kindergarten taking pictures at Meet the Team and at youth camps, and now they're playing in high school. So yeah, it's exciting. Even my own son, he's a 6th grader. Next year he'll start school football, so it's crazy.
So in your 9 seasons, like, what are you most proud of? So, you know, the wins, you know, obviously, you know, the OCC titles, the regional finalists, but what are you most proud of your program?
I think the coolest thing that we do is how many of the alumni want to come back and are proud to be a Pick North Panther. If it's you coming back, being involved, hosting the show, who's an alum, or a Jack Sawyer that comes back and visits practice, who's playing for the Steelers, or the, you know, Tyler Foster, who's helping us coach right now, just got done playing, you know, at Oklahoma State. So just the guys that want to be around. You know, we have so many alumni on our staff, and you know, that are proud to be from here and want to be a part of it.
You know, the Galvins, the Ryan Smiths. I mean, the list goes on and on.
Yeah.
And it seems like the family, right? We always talk about the family. It continues to grow, and it just, you know, you see people doing well in life, you know, good careers, everything else, but also wanting to come back and give back. So
yeah, it's more than football.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, so let's go ahead and jump into the 2025 season. So obviously a big season lies ahead for you. You got one of the most daunting opening schedules maybe in the state of Ohio, starting with St. Ed's, St. Ignatius, back-to-back in Cleveland, Pick Central. So, you know, let's start with your roster this year. You returned 19 seniors and 22 letter winners. Obviously, you lost a lot of production from last year's team that was able to advance to the regional final. Talk about who this offseason has really stepped up as leaders for your team in the offseason workouts, you know, summer camp. Who's really stood out to you as your team leaders?
Yeah, you know, our defense really, we had 7 defensive starters return, and we feel really good there. And they've had an incredible offseason. You know, even guys like Dante Curtis, who's a linebacker for us, who played basketball, was an all-league basketball player, came to every single workout. So those guys have just been consistent, and it's really been finding all those offensive guys, because we lost all 5 starting offensive linemen, some incredible skill players or receivers. So it's almost building a new offense. Like, who are we going to be? So, you know, it's been really good this preseason to get our guys together and really try to find out who we are, because we needed to find some leaders on the offensive line. Brady Boss, we had Kingston Williams moved in here from Reynoldsburg, who's been a big part of that. Avery Price as the sophomore starting up at center. So just, you know, getting those guys to mesh and play together has been good.
Yeah, absolutely. So are you able to name who are the captains for the 2025 season?
Yeah, we have 7 of them. You know, they're all seniors. Our quarterback, Jaron Mock, linebacker, Dante Curtis, Ryan Miller, who's a defensive back for us, Malachi Irvin, defensive end, Elijah Durham Smith, defensive end, Amari Miller, Malachi Taylor, who's another DB. I think that's all 7 of them I mentioned. Hopefully I didn't forget any of them. But they're all guys, and what's incredible about them is, their work ethic in the off season. They do everything right, not only on the football field, but in the classroom. They're guys we don't have to worry about. We can count on them. They lead by example and will even hold others accountable.
One thing I really think that's really cool too, like you see like on the news, you see on social media, if you're going down Tollgate for state testing, they come in, they go out in the community, really make those kids feel important, to a third grader, right? High school football players, like the, end all be all. But at the same time too, going out in the community, giving back, volunteering, it's very prevalent, I feel like, in the community.
Yeah, no doubt. They've been all around. They've, like you said, they visited schools, read to kids. They've done a great job.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's talk about your senior leadership. So it's really the catalyst for great teams at the high school level. How pivotal is your senior leaders for you guys to accomplish your goals in 2025?
Yes, their team. That's what we tell them all the time. You get one senior year where you're the guy. It's their team, and they run the locker room. They decide. They make the decisions on how we do a lot of things, and it's a group that we really like. And I know, everybody sees our motto, core, and that's a big part of this group. They've been together since 7th grade. All those guys, and they went undefeated in 7th and 8th grade. Freshman year went undefeated. And this core group, we just are knocking at the door every year, getting to the regional finals. And, they were kind of thinking of the motto and what they wanted to do. And it was like, that core group has been together and has wanted to do this. And that's kind of where we get that mantra.
So does it stand for anything or just?
Yeah, so it's commit, overcome, respect, and excel is kind of, we decided to, get some letters in there and make it into a, what would that be called?
Like a mantra or motto or a theme for the season.
But really, the biggest thing is just that core group, them core guys, and there's a ton of seniors, the Ethans and Grant Williams and all these guys that we have, Brady Voss, that have been together and
probably
excited.
since PYA ball.
Absolutely, yeah.
So talk about your relationship with the PYA. So generally speaking, you guys have some pretty good involvement with them. So, these kids are growing up, right? 7th grade, playing together in 5th, 6th grade, feeding in the Lakeview North, so that's, it's starting a lot sooner than 9th grade, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's interesting now. My son, I got 2 of my boys are playing PYA football right now for the 5th and 6th grade division and the 3rd and 4th. Then my daughter cheers for it. So I'm living it. I'm at practices, after our practices, picking them up, and they've already had a game. So just the Pickerington football is like no other, and I think it's incredible because football is a numbers game, and we have 7 teams in the 5th and 6th grade division in Pickerington for tackle football. I mean that's incredible, and they do a really good job. They do it the right way. It's not about necessarily wins and losses. It's teaching the right things.
It's not daddy ball.
Absolutely, and I'll give PYA a ton of credit why Pickerington football on both sides of the track are really, really good.
So I got to know, what kind of dad are you when you watch your kids? Are you like Coach Day going in the huddle? Are you sitting there trying to do instruction? Or are you kind of more hands off?
Yeah, we saw that at the 7-on-7 that people were out. He was out there calling the plays. You know what? I try to be hands off as much as I can. I try to lay back and watch. I want them to get coached by their coaches, and I trust them. They get great coaches, but I try to stay out of it.
I mean, it's hard, right? Because you see something and you're like, but you try to be respectful, try to follow the process. So, all right, so let's get into what are your expectations and goals for 2025?
Yeah, I think it's easy to, the tangible ones are, winning the OCC. Our goal is to make the states every year, win a regional championship. Those are the easy ones to say. It's Pickerington. Pickerington North. We expect to win. But I think every team is a little different, right? You want to reach your potential. You want to build men. And I think the great thing is we have a great team, and our potential is we can win every game, and we get an incredible test of that. Week 1, we're playing maybe one of the top teams in the state.
Maybe in the nation. Yeah. I mean, top to bottom. So, talk about the state of the program. So, let's talk about the numbers, freshman, JV, junior high. So, go ahead and give us the state of the program.
Yeah, I don't think our program's ever been in a better spot. I came in and Coach Phillips did an incredible job, and we had an incredible team returning. My first year, we went
regional final.
10-3 and went to the regional final, but our lower levels were decimated. A lot of kids leaving to go for whatever reasons or not playing football, and now we're in the best place we've ever been. Our 7th grade team has over 60 kids.
Wow.
Our 8th grade team has 50 kids. Freshmen have around 50, and we have about 85, 10 through 12 for varsity and JV. And that's buying a lot of equipment and managing a lot of parents and players and doing that.
Sure.
But you can tell people want to be a part of it, right now. And I think we do things the right way. We have great coaches, great facilities. So, when things are going well, people want to be a part of it.
Talk about the momentum of the programs, really, I would say since COVID, right? So
Yeah.
really since COVID, talk about the momentum your program's kind of built.
Yeah, it's been great. It was one of them things that was kind of funky too with, when Jack didn't end up playing with all this stuff going on with COVID, and then we take a team and we win the OCC, for the first time in quite a while. I think beating our rivals 3 times in a row now, 4 out of the last 5 has been a big thing.
Really, I definitely feel like it's turned the tide, the momentum of the program, the fact that, it can be done, correct?
And that game matters. I mean, that's just the facts, so we'll get to that in
Yeah,
a few
yeah,
weeks.
yeah.
But, I think just the positive energy, people want to be a part of what's going on right now.
Yeah.
Pick North.
So, talk about the role that, the coaches at the lower levels play in the development. So, obviously at the younger levels, having those players ready to come out and play varsity football. So, like your 7th or 8th grade, your 9th grade coaches, how important are those staffs in the program to make sure that, they're learning the right technique, they're learning the system, and by the time they get to you as sophomores, they're ready to play varsity football?
Yeah, and the football and the X and O's, that's all obviously really, really important. But I think the number one thing is having coaches that get along with kids and can relate to players, because you got to keep them all around. Like saying, we have almost 70, we started with almost 70 7th graders. That is incredible. Well, we want to keep them around because you can only play 11. So it's building relationships, keeping guys around, making them love football and want to stay a part of the program. So that way we can
almost like
develop
the senior class now would be a really good example of that.
Yeah.
Especially in a 70 freshman players in a 2-school district. That's pretty unheard of.
Oh, it's incredible. And what you got to make sure is, we want our guys playing multiple sports. So we have multiple kids that were on our OCC championship lacrosse team. Brady Brickman, who's a solid role player for us, who's a senior, that wants to be a part of our football program, where he's going to go on and play lacrosse in college.
Yeah.
But, he wants to be a part of our team. So I think that's key for any good program. You saw Liberty this year winning the state.
Yeah, I mean, their depth, that's really, I think, kind of what put them over the edge. They had a lot of great players, but at the same time, too, they were just so deep at every position. They could take a chink in the armor, if you would.
Yeah, and that's why having great coaches at the lower level, so you keep them around. 'Cause it's real easy for a kid here at Pickerington to say, you know what, I'm just going to go focus on baseball.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to focus on basketball. So it's important.
So, talk about, building the culture too. So, is that an expectation you have of your lower level coaches of, what is the culture at Pick North, correct?
Yeah. No, I think it's having a standard. I think when I go watch a 7th grade game or 8th grade game, I want to see kids playing as hard as they can, effort. Some of those things that the X's and O's might change a little bit based on your personnel. So are they going as hard as they can all the time? Those are the things that are non-negotiables. You got to have relentless effort. You got to compete. You got to build a family atmosphere, and that means you got to be there. Be around. And commit
absolutely.
To the process,
So, how do you define success at the lower level? So is it like what we just talked about? Building culture, making kids want to come back. Is that how you would define success at the lower level?
I think them coming back, and obviously wins and losses are great. Like we're competing to win. So
Sure.
We tell them too, there's no guaranteed 50% like PYA anymore. So we're trying to win football games, but we're also trying to keep everyone involved. So as much as we can, we want to be able to rotate and do whatever we need. But I think the kids coming back and want to be a part of our program.
Sure. So, all right, so let's jump into the off season. So, obviously a lot going on. So, you're 7-on-7 event. Really to me, that's turned into one of the premier events, in year 2. Some of the turnout you got this year, obviously you got DeSales, the defending state champion, Watterson, Ashland, that kid up there has got a gun as a quarterback. He's going to be good. Huber Heights, and among others, a lot of Central Ohio programs like, Eddie coming back with Kilbourne, Crabtree back at Jerome. So, talk about, how this event's really become a premier event in the 7-on-7 circuit.
Yeah, you're talking about Coach Crabtree. Dublin Coffin used to host it.
Yeah, they did.
And it was kind of the big deal. Well, when he retired, last year we did one. And it was a huge success. And everybody's like, hey, 8 teams. We had more teams wanting to come. So this year we went to 16. Kind of the same deal this year. We probably have 16 more teams that want to come be a part of it. So we may bump it to a 32-team tournament, but I think it's just having fun, giving the guys something to do to compete against another team.
Absolutely.
You know, so making it exciting, making it fun. Our facilities here are incredible to have both stadiums. We have the turf, the Bermuda grass, all the practice fields.
Absolutely.
So us being able to host it and getting everybody here to see how nice it is, and it was a good deal.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, what we really talked about around Central Ohio and the football community. So, for 2 years in, I mean, that's really become one of the premier events in summer. All right, so we got to talk about this, the DeSales Scrimmage. One of the, backstory for people at home, semifinal game, was it? Yeah, against DeSales. Certain quarterback named R.J. Day, the son of Ryan Day, played against our Panthers. Talk about that experience. I mean, obviously, came down to the last play.
Yeah.
There must have been 500 eyeballs on that. I wouldn't say it got heated, but it was competitive. We'll say.
Yeah, and Coach Day was complaining about me with the refs kind of cheating for us. It was a fun deal.
Yeah.
Everybody was getting after it. It was interesting. I told our coaches, I mean, they were coaching against the national championship coach.
Yeah.
Coach Day is calling their offensive plays, and it was a fun deal. But I think everybody had fun, and have C.J. Stroud out there.
I mean,
hanging out with
we're in
players.
sweats in the middle of July. So, I'm talking to Matt Galvin, who was running the play clock. He talked to Stroud. It's like, what are you doing? We're in sweats in the 90-degree weather. He said, you don't know Houston.
Yeah.
But the one thing I'll say about that was a fun day. But at the same time too, Coach Day and C.J. Stroud were beyond gracious.
Yeah.
With the kids coming up taking photos. Obviously the fanfare. Someone's there seeing watch your kid play.
Yeah.
But at the same time too, I thought they would take photos. I even saw Coach Day taking photos with the kids.
Yeah.
With C.J. So a lot of you always see people on TV, right? But then you actually meet them as people, and they were both outstanding.
Yeah.
So
how much he cared about his son.
Yeah.
That's what's pretty cool out there. You can tell, like, him being a dad.
Yeah. But that was definitely a story told around town for about a few weeks. So that's always that's a good memory. So talk about the Will Howard camp. How did that come around this year?
Yeah, I think it was one of them things with obviously him and Jack are good buddies, and Jack ended up not being able to partner with him and make it this year. But it was the same thing. He was super welcoming. Took pictures with everybody, signed a bunch of stuff for our program, and helped out. But anytime you can have former Buckeyes and national champs.
Yeah, I mean, especially fresh off of a national title like that, and now they're teammates in the NFL too.
Yeah.
So we'll get to that, but okay. So obviously you're finishing up your scrimmage season. You got a really good test from Harvest Prep last Friday. A perennial D4,
Yeah.
D4, and then Glenville as well. I believe they went to the state title against Indian Valley last year. Their linebacker, Sincere Johnson. I mean, that kid was a monster the other night, filling the gap. So talk about, as a program at Pick North, what do you hope to get out of the offseason scrimmage, and what are your goals in this?
I'll tell you what was great is we actually had Mount Vernon scheduled, and they canceled on us last minute. So we were able to jump in with Glenville and Harvest Prep, which I was very happy about because, Berea Mid Park was our first scrimmage, and we had some success. We did well, but nothing against Berea Mid Park, but they're not the same talent as St. Ed's week one. Well, Cleveland Glenville had some guys running around there.
I believe Glenville and St. Ed's played last year, but I want to say Glenville
beat them. Yeah. So what it did was it allowed us to see our problems. Where you're at. You don't get any false confidence. Offensively, we struggled. We kicked 4 field goals, didn't get in the end zone. But not a lot of people score against Glenville.
No,
their scores,
I mean their front seven.
Yeah.
I mean, just man among boys. I mean, it's good size, good speed.
Absolutely, but we played great on defense. Didn't give up a touchdown with our one defense, so happy about that. But we were able to see some of the things. We had a young offensive line, letting them mesh. So we got to see what problems we have, so we can fix them. We can work on them and get better.
Well, thank God for the tablets. You're able to sit there. So what's that film review like? After a scrimmage, really, what are you trying to convey to let's say the offensive line?
Well, I think sometimes you got to look like when you're playing against players like St. Ed's, are we putting our kids in the best position? So are we asking them to do something they can do? Where on a couple of those plays, you talk about their linebacker. Well, he's 6'2", 250. Our guy kind of maybe getting up to the linebacker and blocking him. It's probably not happening. So we might need to double team, run a different scheme to fit our guy. So I think that's what it allows you to do. Be like, all right, we're probably not putting our kid in the best position to try to reach block. defensive lineman going to play at Michigan State.
Yeah. I mean, and let's just be honest, too. You're in a scrimmage, you're in a try, so you're not game planning specifically
Correct.
for one team.
Yeah.
And then, obviously, too, it's a scrimmage. You're not going to show everything you have offensively from a schematic standpoint.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
So, definitely, but, it's a good way to evaluate, maybe some, tweeners, right?
No doubt.
The players that, maybe are they ready for a Friday night, or maybe is it another year in JV ball, try to bring them along a little bit. Okay, so from a player development perspective, how much can the scrimmages help evaluate players in a live setting against someone other than wearing black and silver?
Yeah, you got to have it. I think there's nothing better than those preseason games, because you get so used to going against each other. You start to understand that, hey, this guy's a little bit better than me, and the reps, just the competitiveness. However you set it up, it's just not the same as going against another team. So, it was, so valuable to get those scrimmages in.
That, and you can't cheat plays. I mean, let's just be honest. Like, we've all played, second team ball.
Yeah.
You want to try to get on the field. You cheat a play.
Sure.
Now we're not getting a look.
Yeah.
But how do you tell a player, right?
No
It
doubt.
says to you, hey, don't cheat the play. So,
Yep.
Nope, I completely get that. So, all right, so let's get started with the offense for 2025. So, obviously, we're losing a lot of firepower from last year. You lose Preston Bowman, who's now in the SEC at Kentucky, 1,352 all-purpose yards last year, 14 touchdowns. Michael Taylor, who I think he might get on the field this year at OU. I mean,
he had a good spring.
Yeah, 71 overall on Madden or on NCAA 25,
Yeah.
which is solid for a
that was
freshman.
crazy.
You can tell what I do when I go home. Rushed for 1,436 yards, 1,592 all-purpose last year, 19 touchdowns. And then, like you said, you're replacing your entire offensive line. Aiden Anarino, who's a freshman at Miami, Ohio. You got Rich Simpson at Nebraska now running track. Brian Apia, really good number 2 back for us last year. And then Ashton Hampton, who was a really good number 2 wideout. So, lot to replace. So, the trials of high school football, right? So, you develop all these talents. You get these players opportunities. They go and excel. Now they're playing at the next level. Now you're kind of left here to pick up the pieces for the next season. So, talk about that cycle yearly. Having to replace players. Like obviously, they do great things for us. The program. Won a lot of football games, a lot of notoriety. Talk about kind of how does that work yearly? Having to replace players and get ready for the next season.
Yeah, absolutely. First off, real quick, the EA Sports, the college football, the coolest thing being able to see our guys play.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I know our social media put something out, but just being able to see, all the guys that are playing college football is just, incredible. My son playing with them, it's just really cool. And I think the thing to answer your question is, when we talk about building the numbers or our numbers being high, I think it's kids being able to buy in and understand their role. At a place like Pickerington North, you're not just stepping in and playing as a freshman or playing always as a sophomore, that you're waiting in the wings. You think of somebody like Michael Taylor, who's now playing at OU. As a sophomore, didn't play much varsity.
Sure.
So he's sitting behind DeJuan Green, who's at Wheeling.
And then you get Sam Williams sticks it in.
So he really had 1 year to excel, and I think about our running back right now, Andrew Thomas. As a sophomore, he'd have started at probably 75% of the schools around Central Half. Sat, worked hard, got better, and I think he could have a breakout year.
So, obviously it's 2025. Everyone talks about the transfer portal. In college football, I mean, you see kids playing 5 schools, 5 years.
Yeah.
You kind of see it at the high school level a little bit.
Yeah.
You might have some parents that really don't agree with playing time and stuff. How do you keep a player like that? How do you keep a player like that motivated? You see the potential. You know what they can be. How do you keep them focused, locked into the program, and then tell them hey, your time will come, and then it does.
I think it's tough, and we've done a really good job of. I think we can just say, hey, look at the resume we built. So this isn't us telling you we're going to do it. We can say, Jonas Mann played JV as a sophomore.
Sure.
Now he plays Akron. Michael Taylor didn't start until his senior year, and he's at OU doing great. So it's one of those things that it's just fact. We've shown it now.
Right?
So like when we tell a 7th or 8th grader, because the reality is the transfer portal is real in high school. Now you got to move into Pickerington North,
sure,
which makes it a lot tougher. But there's a lot of schools. Any kid can decide to go to Hartley or Sales.
Open enrollment certain district.
Yeah, the open enrollment schools all around Fairfield County. So I think them trusting the process and what we're doing here, and that's where I think the momentum we have and and we treat kids right. I tell everybody, like, our coaches, we coach them like they're our own kids, and that's,
you see it.
That's the fact.
Yeah,
like,
you see it.
Our kids are going to play here. Like, we want coaches to live in Pickering. Like, we want everybody to be here, be a family. And I think when you do that, the parents trust what we're telling them.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so, we talked about this earlier. So, obviously, from an offensive perspective, talent comes and goes. You have strengths certain seasons, other seasons you have strengths at different places. So, really, how would you define your program? Like, are you, certain programs, like, let's say Dublin Kaufman, 20 years ago, Hilliard Davidson, they had a set system. Either you fit or you don't. And then there's other programs in the area, personnel based. Maybe one year we're 5 wide, maybe next year we're going to 22 personnel. What's your viewpoint on that?
Yeah, if you ever heard, I think of Mount Union, Coach Karras, who was there, who's legendary, maybe one of the greatest coaches ever. His whole thing used to be players, formations, plays. And that's kind of how we are. I believe, it starts with the players, and we build our system around the players. Last year we didn't really have a tight end, so we didn't use the tight end. A couple years ago we've had the Tyler Fosters, in the past the Jake Butts, and we got some tight ends now, so we're going to use tight ends. So we're going to build everything we do around our players. On defense, we could be a 3-man front one year. The next year we could be a 4-man front. So we're going to do what's best for our players to put them in the best position.
Yeah, absolutely. Get the best 11 on the field. Any obviously you're going to play some kids 2 ways probably.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. Here we really don't want to, but there's a few kids, we call them 1.5 players. There's never going to be anybody that's on the field full time both ways, but some of our guys like a Dante Curtis, who's our linebacker, he's going to come and play a little bit of tight end. A Brady Boss will rotate on the D line. So we're going to try to get those guys, those difference makers out there as much as we can.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's walk through your offense. Very basic here. You got Jordan Sauce-Mock coming back, Bowling Green commit. Really, I thought came along really well last year. Obviously first game against St. Ed's. It was a new system. Obviously wasn't our night that night. Yeah. But, he really came along, obviously the Granville game. And then, the development I think you saw out of him for the Olentangy Berlin game, having that awareness, scored that touchdown right before the half. So threw for 2,605 yards last year, 23 touchdowns. Really developed throughout last year during the playoff run. So how nice is it to have Jaron back as a senior with a young offense? And then what growth do you really want to see out of him this season?
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, and I think the other thing, he only threw 4 interceptions, took care of the football, which is the most important thing. We are going to need him to make plays like he did against Berlin, against St. Ed's week 1. There's going to be a lot of times where we're going to put the ball in his hand. He's going to have to make some plays. He's going to have to make the right decisions. I think that is the key thing. I think last year he was learning a new system right into it, right into the fire against St. Ed. So we're going to ask a lot out of him, and he's up for it. I'm excited. Our offense will really go as he goes. We have a lot of RPOs set up where it's run pass option. He's making the choice, out there. So we're trusting him.
Yeah, you're trusting him.
And I'm excited about what he can do this year.
So talk about your backfield. Obviously, we already spoke about Andrew Thomas, Marquise Ray. That's pretty much, Marquise, sophomore, Andrew a junior. Yeah. Young guys, really haven't gotten an opportunity yet. Talk about your running game.
Yeah, and we're going to play some of those defensive guys. Amari Miller might come over, and Malachi Taylor, who are defensive guys, get over and get some carries. We don't want to put all the weight on Andarique, but we'll rotate guys in that position. But really, Andarique's going to get a load of the carries.
Yeah, absolutely. And, even some of the mop-up duty last year, you see the burst. He's really got good ball carrier vision, at least from what I've seen from the box. Wide receivers, obviously you got Grant Williams coming back. He's going to be your dude, at the X more likely this year, correct? And then you got Tyce Warren. You got Ethan Zadari. That figures to be your wide receiver. Anybody else that you could really see, kind of making a contribution at the wideout?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, that's the position we're pretty deep at. We got guys like Noah Dumas, Matthew Peterson, Caleb Stanley, who caught a touchdown against Berea Mid-Park. Marquise Ray is going to play a lot of slot. A lot of those guys can rotate and play. Grant, I expect Grant and Ethan to have big senior years for us. But that's a group I think that we can get a lot of production out. We don't really have a Preston Bowman that is a guy that we have to keep out there every play. I don't expect to take Grant out a lot, but we got a lot of guys that can play at that position.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of young guys, kind of looking for that opportunity, correct?
A lot of speed, too. Guys like Tice on the track, they they can make some
Well,
plays.
it's a nice problem for you to have the track program that we
Yeah.
do. So, okay, so tight end, obviously, Brent Parsons really, that figures to be your guy at tight end. Obviously some defensive guys coming over too.
Yep.
Dante.
Elijah Durham-Smith
yeah.
can come over. Brent Parsons coming back was just huge for
Yeah.
us. Took a year off. He was a rotator at tight end as a sophomore. Baseball players going to college to play baseball, but him coming back his senior year has just been huge. Really good football player, great friends with these guys, and that's what I say about keeping these guys around, because he's a key part of this core group that we have that we need.
One thing I noticed about Ben was the other night Scrimmage. He's been asked to do a lot. Coming out of that hip, going down blocking. Yeah. He took on every single block. I did not see him shy away once. And one thing I noticed about him coming back to the sideline, he wants to be coach.
Yeah.
He's asking, Coach Pruitt, Coach Freddie questions. What, I see this. So, I really noticed that about Ben the other night. Talk about your offensive line. So, obviously, young group. You've got your leader Brady Boss, Kingston Williams, who transferred in, Troy Canes, Avery Price figured to be in the rotation. Talk about, obviously you're young, but what are your expectations for your offensive line, and what kind of development do you hope to see?
Yeah, and we got a couple other guys too. Gabe Shalmo, Dirk Conjera, who's a freshman who I think is going to end up starting this week against St. Ed's.
Okay.
So, we have, I think, about 7 or 8 guys that I think can play varsity. Javion Massey, who's really a core piece of that group. So it's just them meshing together. You have to communicate. You got to get reps together as an offensive line. Like, there's so many combo blocks where it's feel and talking that you just have to have those.
You have to have
reps.
that communication.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the important thing. These guys got to play together, and they're just going to only get better as the year goes on.
Especially doing a little bit more RPO too. I mean that's a very complicated scheme.
Absolutely.
At the high school level. Not legal man downfield.
Yeah.
Like trying to stay in the box. No one having that awareness. So you're not just you're not just run blocking. You're not just pass blocking.
Yeah.
You're being asked to do a lot more.
Yeah.
So all right. So let's get into your defense. So. Coming into 2024, the defense is really the unproven commodity. So last year, our offense, we thought we were going to score 45 points a game. Yeah, the defense, it started a little slow, right?
Yeah.
St. Ed's, they have physical of us. Granville came in, probably ran the triple option better than what we've seen in a long time. Scores 51 points.
Yeah.
There was a lot of question marks with the defense. And then, after a couple of rough games, week 5 to week 9 last year, allowed 35 points, 7 points a game. Really, I think that Thomas Worthington game, really, I think that's where you kind of saw that the defense, kind of mature. They were a young group last year. Now, you look at it, that's your best group on the team, correct?
Yeah, I love our defense, and we got a really veteran group, guys that have played a lot of football in big situations. And like you said, the progress we made last year from the Granville game where you give up 50 to playing Olentangy Berlin in the regional semis and holding them to 7 points. A team that's been scoring 20-plus every game.
Well, you look at that Berlin game, too. You got in a situation, you had an unfortunate late turnover in that game, and your defense has got to bail you out. And, how many times, even against Pick Central in the playoff game, sometimes the offense maybe didn't always get started the fastest, but that defense, scoring touchdowns in the playoff game, getting stops. It's really exciting to see most of that group come back.
Yeah, and just the experience, you can't have that. It's going to be fun to watch this group. They run to the ball. They love playing with each other. Great friends, just tough. They're excited for the challenge, too, to get to play against one of the top offenses in all of Ohio this week. And it starts up front. Our 2 defensive ends, I think, are, the best 2 D ends in the state. When you talk about Malachi or
absolutely.
Smith,
That dual pass rush.
Just been unblockable. So, they've been incredible. And then you got, I think Dante Curtis is kind of the leader, running around, coming off the edge, dropping into pass coverage, had an interception in the Berea scrimmage. Then we got a secondary that's all returning. Guys that have all played a lot of football.
You have Ryan Miller, who's that kid's been a leader for your football team since he was a sophomore. Silent leader, but that kid just plays football. Obviously Malachi, turnover machine last year, but I think he had 4 touchdowns in 2 games last year. I never saw a streak like that before.
Yeah,
so,
Maury Miller, Gio McKnight, just an incredible player who'll be a sophomore. The thing too, they're all big and long.
Yeah.
You go in our weight room, they're all benching over 225. They're benching more than most teams' offensive lines.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a physical group.
So, you mentioned the defensive line. Obviously Elijah Durham-Smith, 56 tackles, 19 TFLs last year, 7 sacks. You got Malachi Irvin, which, by the way, that hit he had the other night over Oral Harvest. I mean, that was, that Glenville quarterback. I mean, that was just a kill shot. I mean, that was, that was the first Woo hit I've seen in a long time. So, 53 tackles, 12 tackles for loss, 6 sacks. So, you mentioned, that's a nice luxury having bookends like that. I mean, that's probably the first time in your career you've had bookends that are that talented. Who else on the defensive line do you expect to contribute?
Yeah, well, we did have Jack Sawyer, Alex, but we've had
you're right.
There's been a lot of really, really good players come through here. We've been fortunate. Elijah Hawk, I mean, just a ton of them. Even last year, Ben Thompson, who we lost, but. What were you saying again with that?
Oh, so who do you expect, also on the defensive line? Obviously the headliners. Who else can contribute on the defensive line?
Well, that's where, we'll play some of our guys, like a Brett Parsons who's playing tight end can come in and sub in a little bit, but really that nose guard position is just going to be kind of revolving door. We're going to ask a lot of our offensive linemen to take some reps there. We got a couple seniors, Evan Stoner, who will get in there and get some reps. Raph. Couple different guys that it's just going to be a bunch of bodies we're going to throw in there and kind of plug up.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the linebacker group, you mentioned Dante Curtis. Who else do you see contributing in the linebacker room?
Yeah, Tyshawn Smith and Brock Houston have had great off seasons, and also Dante's brother, Demetrius.
He's a sophomore, correct?
Sophomore. He has made play after play. So we're excited about all of them. They can all help us out. We'll all rotate there in the next room.
I heard
three linebacker set.
I heard some rumblings about his brother last year. They think he could be.
He's been doing great. So.
Yeah. So, the defensive backfield, we mentioned Ryan Miller, moving to strong safety last year. For that secondary, I kind of look at him as like the coach on the field.
Yeah.
He can make sure everybody's lined up. And that's one thing I was really impressed about with their defense last week. Coach James does a great job of, setting the sets, coaching on the field.
Yeah.
I don't know if you need them. I mean, these guys literally know where to line up. They're sitting there talking, they're shifting. You can just hear them constantly talking. The communication, to me, I think that's a really strong suit for that group.
Oh, that's what football is all about, being able to communicate. We can run a lot of coverages with this group, where a couple years ago we were running cover 3 every play, or cover 1 playing man every play. So this group, they can check. Coach James allows them to do a lot of different things. It's really good having all that veteran experience out there.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned Malachi with 7 picks last year, 4 pick sixes. Murray Miller, 30 picks, 34 tackles. Chio, really getting that experience as a freshman last year. Figures to really have a big, step up this year. Masad Sadu, really a special teams gamer. I mean, I swear, I must have called his number 30 times last year, tackles on special teams. He figures to, be a little bit more in rotation this year.
I expect him. He's in the start at corner right now. Had a great 7-on-7.
Yeah, he did.
Had a pick against the Sales and had a great summer playing coverage. So expect him to have a big year.
So, you talk about how special this veteran group can be. How much better can they get? Really, what's the ceiling?
It's a group, like I said, they haven't given up a touchdown in 2 scrimmages and playing a lot of football. The big thing that we're challenging them with is that sometime adversity is going to happen some plays. Just making sure that we stay tight and keep things together, and it's on to the next play.
Absolutely. And then I can't not mention special teams. You got a pretty special kicker. Yeah. I mean, obviously Icewater in his veins against Granville last year really kind of bailed us out in that one. Yeah. Consistent last year. He's looked great. Fowler, he's looked great in the scrimmages.
Yeah, we've made a lot of field goals. Made 4 in the last scrimmage. I think we made 3 in the scrimmage before that. So it's going to be a weapon. And when you play in big games like St. Ed's and San Ignatius and Pick Central, special teams come down to it. So being able to flip the field with punt,
absolutely,
and be able to, you get inside the 25 and you're automatically going to get 3 points is huge.
Yeah. So let's get into St. Ed's. You open next at Baldwin Wallace. St. Ed's won the last 4 of the last 8 state titles. Lost the Final Four game to Old Tangy Liberty. Respect the Liberty, right? You beat 2 parochials. We had our battle against them at Crew. Tip your cap to them. Led by head coach Tom Lombardo, one of the best coaches maybe in the state. Braden White, really, the running back senior. He had a big game against us last year. Zach Heckelman, receiver. The people at St. Ed's think he might be the best receiver to come through there. That's saying a lot. Straw pulls too. When we talked about, get on the Appy, right? St. Ed's preseason number 2, we're number 6. Big. You talk about big matchups week 1. We talk about like Texas Ohio State, right? The big primetime week 1 matchup. So I guess how did the relationship start in St. Ed? So you guys scrimmaged for a few years. Now you've played home and home. How did that relationship start?
That was one of the things coming here. As we've had success, our goals. What do we got to do to get to the state Final Four, to the state championship game? You got to play those type of teams.
Absolutely.
So first we started scrimmage at St. Ed's, and we were playing Elder and Centerville and all teams that win and do really well. And the more you win, which we have, and the more good players you have, people don't want to play you. So we've had some games with UA and Liberty and some of those teams, but in Central Ohio, some of the teams, they'd prefer not to play because maybe we're in the same region. So I don't want to say we were forced into playing some of these games, but there wasn't a lot of options, and nothing but respect for St. Ed's. So after scrimmaging them, we're like, you know what, let's go. Let's play.
And you speak about the home and home. A lot of times, they might come down here, Central Ohio, and a lot of teams maybe not go back.
Yeah.
So a lot of respect to the program. We want those opportunities.
Yeah,
we want the home and homes.
We can't wait to go back up there, and it's nothing but respect for their program. They've done what we want to do.
Sure.
So it's like we're coming after that, and I think our players respect it, and our kids aren't scared. We're ready to go play.
So let's talk about that. So obviously last year, I think that opener was a learning experience. Playing a team of that caliber. How much does that experience provide extra focus to the details this week? Your preparation the last few weeks. Added motivation, but it's not like an opener. Let's say Ohio State's playing Bowling Green. You're kind of going through emotions.
No, for sure.
This week, the previous weeks, the task is at hand.
And that's what I think was great, scrimmaging Glenville and getting to see the size and speed that's pretty similar to what we're going to see this week. But, we've told our guys to have success this week, we got to be disciplined. Last year there were some penalties. We didn't play clean football.
Yeah.
You're not beating a team like St. Ed's if you have penalties, you have holding calls, you turn the ball over. So we got to play clean. And I think that's the big thing we've kind of pushed on. And we've had a physical preseason and got after these guys because, when you play a team like this week 1, we're not playing a team where we know we're going to go out there and win.
Yeah.
So it's you can really emphasize everything and say, like, you're not winning if we jump off sides there, and go across the line or have a roughing the passer. So we got to play clean, got to be disciplined, got to take care of the football.
Absolutely. So, talk about, that loss from week 1 last year. What lessons did your team learn? You reeled off 8 straight wins after that. What kind of lessons do you think the team learned last year, and some of the returnees kind of take from a game like that?
Yeah, I think, it shows you where your weaknesses are. And a lot of times you get that false confidence of some of the things you do. And that's what I thought was great this year, getting a scrimmage in Glenville, because we can learn some of those things, hopefully, before St. Ed's, where, last year we had a first-year quarterback. Jaron's been in the mix a lot. I feel confident, with him having confidence now, and our guys expect to win, where last year they just weren't real sure.
Yeah.
So it should be a fun event.
So, you play a team like that. How does that make, the rest of your schedule? Obviously this year, you're not really getting that step down to game 2, game 3. So, what are your goals out of this game? Obviously health, making sure, okay, we're going to, take this as a learning experience, hopefully win the game, but at the same time, too, what can you carry in the St. Ignatius Pick Central League?
Yeah, you got to stay healthy. I mean, you talk about the gauntlet, the first 3 weeks is huge. Just getting better every week. So there's going to be mistakes. All right, so then you get a week, get back out there, you got to correct them, get better at it, and then see where you go. And really, we break the season up. There's three seasons. It's the non-league, and then you get to the league, you want to go win the league, and then it's all right, you're in the playoffs, let's go make a run.
So, really, as a head coach, the old adage is your best improvements from week 1 to week 2. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think even in high school, the scrimmages. I think, and you watch around, we've watched some scrimmages. You see a team that scrimmages week 1, the first scrimmage, how much they improve the second scrimmage. And then that's why I think it's so important to play some good teams. That's why we started scrimmage at St. Ed's, because you can really find out who you are.
Yeah.
But this one's real, so it magnifies it all.
So we talked about, St. Ed's, we talked about the defense, how they're excited for that opportunity. St. Ed's, they play a pro style. They're going to come out 2 tight ends. They're going to be physical. They probably have, they have White. They have a really good passing game. Out of the pro style. What kind of challenges does their offense present?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, they can do a lot of different things well. They do a lot of different tempos. They put a lot of pressure on your defense. Quarterback is an excellent runner. They have multiple of them that they can play. So I think the important thing is you can't just sit in base defense against them, or they're going to pick you apart. They're going to eat you up. So you got to mix up some coverages, mix up some fronts, make it hard for the quarterback, change the picture for him pre-snap. So we're going to do our best out there.
So obviously their defense last year. Just me being in the box, I have not seen a defense that showed so many fronts last year. Obviously a lot of zone blitzes, disguising, shifting. It was a different look every single play. So as an offense, what do you have to do to combat that?
I think you got to simplify things. You can't try to do too much. Like you said, they're shifting pre-snap, they're rolling guys down, they're bringing corner blitzes, and they're doing this in scrimmages. It's not like they save it all for week 1. Like we're watching their scrimmages, and they're bringing corners, safety, backer, 6-man pressures, 5-man pressures. So we got to be sound. We got to trust our rules. We're going to trust Jaron to get us into the best situations. So it's going to be a challenge.
So, then their scrimmage schedule was no joke either. I believe, Central Catholic out in Toledo, I believe they scrimmage.
And Menor.
And Menor,
played in the regional finals.
So, obviously the 5 wide, gunslinging Menor. So, you already kind of talked about this, but, typically in the season opener, we see some sloppy plays, multiple penalties. What do you have to do this week during preparation to avoid that on Friday? Obviously we talked about, we're not going to win Friday if that happens. But, what do you do during practice during the week to really try to avoid the sloppy play usually you see in week 1?
I think putting guys in situations as much as possible. 2-minute drills and that are real football situations, not just running plays. We're working third downs, we're working a red zone period, so we're doing as many real life situations and putting pressure on them where it's competition, best on best, win or lose. So we've tried to do a lot of that.
So, tell us, challenge, so obviously you have some familiarity of Lakewood now, but, you play teams from out of town.
Yeah.
You don't see them a whole lot. It's not like playing a league team, once a year. How much of a challenge is that to prepare for a team not in your area or region?
Yeah, it's tough, and luckily now we played them a couple times in the scrimmages and this, but you really, what's nice now is we can watch last year's game too. And St. Ed's, if you watch a game from 5 years ago, it's really similar. Like they have a system of what they do. So we can go back and we can learn from it and work to get better.
Sure. So, what will your team have to do to come out victorious Friday night in Berea?
Number 1, play clean, penalty free. Can we be a more disciplined team, than them? Our goal is to have less than 5 penalties. Got to take care of the football. Got to win the turnover battle. And then special teams. We talked about it earlier. We have to be able to flip the field. You can't have a bad snap on a punt or a PAT. So you got to play great special teams. We're looking at one big play. Could we get a big block punt, or could we get a kickoff return, or something there? We can get a big play. And then the last thing is we got to be able to play 4 quarters. I think this is going to be a dogfight. So we got to be able to finish a game. Scrimmages, that's the one thing. Scrimmages, you play a couple quarters, you're rotating guys. Well, this is going to be a 4-quarter
slobber knocker,
just a battle. So we got to be able to play 4 quarters.
So okay, so we'll move on to a couple questions from the off season. Talk about the out of conference schedule, back-to-back trips to Cleveland. We already kind of touched on that. What does that do to help you in November?
Yeah, it prepares you. You think about who you want to play down the line. You got to get ready for that. You got to see that speed.
Build that confidence too in house too.
Yeah. And you can't be afraid to possibly lose a game. We played some really tough with the Pine Richlands, the Granvilles, the Centervilles, the Elders. You got to play some people.
I'm pretty sure the year we played Pine Richland, they won the state title.
Yeah. You got to play some people.
Yeah. So, describe, these long road games, So my dad actually asked me this question. How do you keep your, it's long bus rides, right?
Yeah.
So what? It's 142 miles, 2 hours and 20 minutes to Berea. So you're doing that pretty much back to back. As a head coach, putting together an itinerary, making sure, we're getting the kids out of school. Okay, are they fed, nutritional? You got a long bus ride. How do you manage a Friday like that and then have your kids ready to play at 7 o'clock?
A lot of help. Coach Spickler is our football ops guy, so he He plans it all out when our bus needs to leave. If we need to stop, some of these trips when we played in Pittsburgh, we stopped and did a walkthrough kind of halfway. So we'll feed the kids. We're on charter buses. We do everything first class with the parents. They're getting them Jimmy John's before they get on. They get them pizza after. So it's kind of exciting. You start off the year doing it 2 weeks in a row. That's a little much, but I think it's always nice to go on one big trip. Where you get to get on charter
Feels
buses.
kind of like, has that bowl game feeling a little bit too. So
it's a big game.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're getting on a charter bus, it's a big game.
Yeah, so let's talk about, the strength Central Ohio. So, obviously Liberty won the state title in Division I last year, Region 3. You got the Olentangies. You've got, the Pickeringtons. You got the Gahannas. Grove City's really on the rise. Talk about, some of these programs. Really the depth of the Region 3 right now is, in the last 25 years, this is the strongest region maybe in the state of Ohio.
Yeah, I think I would talk about our league. The OCC, I think, is the best league in Ohio, no question. Liberty winning the state championship. Pick Central's won 2 recently. Upper Arlington's won 1.
Davidson's
won 2. There's a lot of parity, a lot of good programs. So you can just see the depth. You think about last year, our region, the Olentangy Braves went 8-2, and they were the 13th seed. So it's a brutal region. Our league, teams like New Albany that are Division II, or Big Walnut, who goes to the Final Four in Division II. OCC is a tough league.
You look at it last year. We were talking about this earlier. Any team 1 through 11 could have made it to Mansfield last year.
Yeah.
Really, the depth. And really, it's not 5 or 10 years ago where it was just, big bad Davidson or big bad Central and everybody else is just kind of there in the wings.
Yeah.
The competitive balance really has shifted.
Liberty lost 2 games, in the regular season, who won the state, and Dublin Kaufman had them beat in the final seconds.
The other thing to look at too is, obviously, we played a 4-quarter game with Liberty. UA had them dead to rights.
Yeah.
And then, they go and beat St. Ed's and, take out Mullers. You look at...
weren't close games either,
No, they weren't. So let's talk about the realigned playoffs. So I know you've been a big proponent of the 16 teams not good.
Yeah.
With the 12 this year, what are your thoughts on that for Division I?
It's funny. Me and Coach Lombardo we're talking about that a little bit. The 12 is interesting because if you get the bye, do you want the bye?
No,
you don't have a choice.
It's not like basketball where you can say, hey, we want to play game 1 or.
There's a lot of questions. If you're playing good football, coaches like to be in your team. Do you want the bye? That's a tough one. And then, you're starting to get winter sports are starting up, so kids are wanting to possibly go to basketball tryouts or wrestling. So there's just so many variables. And obviously I don't really like the 16 just I thought the season is just so long, already, and it's a violent sport, but it'll be interesting to see how it works out.
A high school bye week. I don't know. They do that in other states. I'm not familiar with that.
I don't know. Maybe Indiana, because they let everybody in the playoffs, so it could work out. Somebody could.
But you look at it. We were talking about the Fantastic 50 today.
Yeah.
6 and 4. They had us projected at. Hopefully that's not how that goes. 6 and 4 had us missing at 12. So you look at it. You look at the last few years. I understood it during the COVID year. Obviously, there some teams in and out. Okay, fine. It was ridiculous. 1 and 2 loss, 2 win teams are making the playoffs. You're setting these kids up for failure. So I think, I personally I prefer.
12's tough.
Yeah, 12's tough. 8 was I guess, do you miss the week 9, week 10 games mattering?
I think what I missed was when you made the playoffs, you knew you had a great year.
Well, look at what you did at Hamilton.
Yeah.
What was your playoff drought before you got there?
Yeah, it had been 20 years. So then you make the playoffs, and you knew it was you're getting kids T-shirts and all those things like it's a huge deal. You're everywhere you go, any high school in their gym, it usually have state playoff years for football. It was just such a big deal. It kind of took that away when there were 16. Now 12, I do think the 12, that is the one thing the 12 is bringing back, because you look at some of these regions, 6 and 4, you're not guaranteed to get in the playoffs.
So what is that?
Really good teams.
What does that do to your future scheduling, though? So let's just say, week 1 through week 4, we go play gauntlet schedule. Say maybe it's a rebuilding year. Maybe you start out 1-3, 0-4. It's happened before. What does that do to your future scheduling?
I think that's a question for everybody. It was funny. I was talking to our AD about this today, and I told him Groveport's scheduled Cincinnati Mola, which he was like, with everybody making the playoffs, let's go try it out. That's what he told me, and he's like, if I knew it was going to be 12, he wouldn't have done that. So it's really going to make it, I think, a lot harder for teams like St. Ed's, and it's going to make it harder for us to find teams because everybody's, they want to you want to find somebody you can beat.
It's almost like 2008 all over again, where okay, let's find someone that's maybe a Division II, Division III level, great programs. We feel, we have a good chance to get, and they're going to win 7 games. We're going to get those level 2 points, right? Points. So, talk about the 16-game season. We just talked about that.
Yeah.
How important is roster management throughout the season? You saw that with Ohio State last year, right? Maybe not, Henderson and Junkins, right? Maybe, it's a timeshare. How do you kind of incorporate that in your program, potentially playing 16 games?
I think that's why it's important to build depth. I think, the last 2 years we've won 11 games, played 14 last year, 13 the year before. That's a lot of football.
Yeah.
And 2 years ago when we lost to Bradley in the regional semis, our tight end was out, our starting offensive lineman, Aiden Marino was out with a knee. So there were so many injuries that built up. We weren't the same team we were when we played a Pine Richland early in the year, beat Elder at Elder. So I think that's the thing that's tough. It's a long season.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, let's talk about Panthers at the next level. So, we have to start with Jack Sawyer. I got to know, we've talked about it a little bit, but tell the fans at home, the scoop and score. What's going on in the Hill Ridge household when that happened?
Yeah, one of the coolest things ever. Watching the game, I'm, sitting on the couch with my son, and, everybody's jumping up and down. I probably got literally 50 texts in a matter of minutes. I think I was hearing people yell from other houses. It was all of Pickerington, I think, was yelling.
Did you do the Ryan Day sprint through the house, kind of chasing?
I was jumping. I wasn't sitting down, I know that. It was so happy for him. How cool was that? I mean, a Buckeye legend now forever.
Well, you look at that, too. So I was unfortunate at the Michigan game. I took my fiance. She's a grad. I probably go to 5 OSU games a year. And I was like, Michigan down this year. I'm going to take her to a Michigan win.
Yeah.
Jack Sawyer's right in front of me. Gets that interception right at the goal line. And, would have went down as one of the great all-time Michigan-Ohio State goal line stops. And it got taken away from him, and he feels so bad. I wouldn't say anything bad about Knowles. Him not having his hand in the ground was a mistake.
Yeah.
Obviously we saw what he was capable last year, putting his hand back in the dirt.
Yeah.
So, obviously let's talk about, the Steelers. I look at Jack Sawyer, that is a perfect fit for Jack Sawyer. So talk about, you and Pruitt went to training camp. What was that like?
Their staff, Mike Tomlin is the greatest human I've ever been around. Just how welcoming he was to allow high school coaches to come and sit in meetings, listen and learn, which was really cool. But, just being able to see what's going on there. They have a plan for Jack, and I think that's the key for the NFL. It's a business. It's cutthroat.
Yep.
So they have a plan for him. He looks great. He's about 10 pounds lighter. Everything I've been reading and even watching on the preseason games, he's getting off the ball, making plays.
What about that hit he had the other night?
Yeah.
It was literally disruptive.
Yeah, I think he's doing a really good job. He's got to stay healthy, and it should be a great year for him. Get to be out there with T.J. Watt.
T.J. Watt, Highsmith.
Yeah.
Obviously Hayward. I mean that to me that is the best situation.
Yeah.
And he's there full Howard too.
Yeah.
And he's got a real chance to play too.
No doubt.
So, obviously, Alex Williams even got an opportunity with the Vikings.
Yeah.
Obviously, he got the injury designation.
Yep.
Is a free agent right now. But, what can you speak on that?
Yeah, hopefully he can come back healthy and he's going to get a shot. He's in communication with teams, so he's on the IR, and, when he gets back, he hopefully gets another little shot.
Yeah, I saw that at the some of the combine work, and he was jacked here.
Yeah.
He looks like a grown man. So, let's talk about other alumni. Jake Butt in the media.
Incredible.
Jake, to me, that's the next Joel Klatt. He is fantastic on Big Ten
Incredible.
Network.
He is incredible. Now, one thing before I get into Jake Butt, and Pat Elfline, who came back, and I don't know if you had him on there, but he still has a chance, I think, to get signed by a team. Last we talked to him, he was training. He was ready to roll his phone. He's just waiting on a call. He said he wants one more year at it, one more run. But so I think Pat could end up getting a call at some point if there's some injuries on the offensive line.
And naturally, it's going to happen too.
Yeah,
so.
that's why he's ready, waiting in the wings. And Jake Butt is incredible. I didn't get a chance to coach him, but he's came back, gave a pregame speech last year while he was calling the Big Ten game. Came back over, incredible. It's great to see all the alumni.
So it was funny. I was on a stadium tour at Ohio Stadium, and you go up in the press box, very old and not the best. Yeah. But in the bathroom, there's a bathroom in there. They literally had a sign that said "Butts Locker," but he was calling the game that day. But yeah, he's done a fantastic job. So his career's really his trajectory. Really at the media level is insane. All right, so we talked about this earlier. The Dispatch top 25 since 2020 or 2000, so last 25 years. Keep in mind, Pickerington North opened in 2003, so we're on year 22 as a program.
Yeah.
So check this out. So the Dispatch has named the top 25 football players since 2000. Starting, 5 Panthers are represented. Number 12, Pat Elfline, who we just spoke about. Number 16, Godwin Igwebuike, who might be the best running back in Columbus I ever saw. Heck of a DB too. 19, Jake Butt. 21st, Justin Bourne, who was an All-American. And then number 22, Jack Sawyer. So out of that list, Pickerington North had the most players represented in the top 25, and those are the Dispatch writers. Those are the Ulrys, everybody that has followed high school football the last 25 years. What's that say about your program?
It just shows you what a special place this is. What an honor it is for me to be able to come here and coach with the alumni list that you talk about, me getting to coach a couple of them. So it's just really cool because that was something I didn't see. I didn't know that until you showed me that. That's pretty neat to see.
And then 7 players in the NFL we've sent. So the list just continues to grow
too. Growing. So I think that's the thing that's really cool. Like you said, we didn't open until 2003, and I think our best football is ahead of us.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
the cool part.
Well, like you said, people want to be a part of it.
Yeah.
So speaking about college football, building a program, you mentioned Tyler Foster coming back.
Yeah.
Played for Mike Gundy in Oklahoma State last year. Was an Ohio University guy on staff. So you got former players coming back, wanting to be a part of that.
Yeah, and he's back, and then you got former alumni. Alex Huddle is at Old Dominion as the offensive line coach. Alex Bear is the tight end coach at Bowling Green. They're reaching out. They're stopping by the school. Just that ability to have them alumni back is incredible.
Yeah. So really, a lot of these camps and stuff you're doing, you're building relationships with those coaches, different programs at different levels, and really giving our student athletes opportunities.
Yeah.
So so let's move on to some of our players at the next level. We'll call them our Saturday heroes. Angela McCollum, sophomore, Illinois, massive defensive tackle. Yeah. Illinois figures have a really good team this year. My wedding day is against Illinois, so I've gotten a lot of flack about that.
You scheduled that on purpose, thought it was an easy win, huh?
Yeah, looking at the schedule originally. But talk about, Angela's development, potential monster season for him.
Yeah, I think he's in the mix to rotate and have an impact, so it's going to be exciting to watch him,
And then Eli Compass, we talked about, playing the Sam at Miami, Ohio. He's got a really good chance of really getting some good playing time this year.
Yeah, and I arguably his senior year is one of the best football seasons I've ever seen a Pick North player have. I'm excited to watch him. Hopefully have a breakout.
And then Aiden too, at center.
Yeah.
Probably an injury away, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So and then Jonas Mann over at Akron.
Yep.
He is a man, 6'7". So really good opportunity there. And then obviously Sam Williams Dixon. OSU. Probably RB3 coming into the season.
Yeah.
But Donaldson, Peoples in front of him. But he's got a really good chance to get in that timeshare.
Yeah, they're going to play multiple backs. With the schedule they have. So
absolutely.
He's going to get in the mix a lot.
And then really, the coolest story I think I came across was JJ Siebert.
Yes.
Walking on. I mean, my heart just broke for him in his senior year. Obviously he got injured, had to miss the rest of his senior year. Kind of bounced around, but getting to walk on to OSU. What do you know about that?
Incredible. So he went to Bucknell, full scholarship. Actually played and rotated a little bit and decided, wasn't a fit for him to live all the way. I think it's in Philly. Came back home, was going to Ohio State. Ohio State calls because they were cutting their rosters. The NCAA was going to cut the rosters to 105 and then told them they could be at 120. So actually Ohio State reached out to me and was like, hey, do you know anybody that was, want to walk on that has to be a really good player? So they picked I called JJ. JJ was like, absolutely. So he had to go do some stuff for him, and they loved his film. They picked up a couple other guys. So I think Bradley's receiver, the Wolf kid, Preston Wolf, who when they beat us in the regional semis. Yeah. But great opportunity for JJ. He's someone I could see being a special teams player.
Absolutely. I mean, he played safety wide out for us.
Yeah.
He was kind of our Swiss Army knife, his senior season.
Absolutely.
So, speaking of Preston Bowman, at Kentucky right now, obviously was injured in the spring, playing in the SEC. how do you see him, possibly redshirting this year, or possibly have a chance of playing this year?
Yeah, I think they're going to redshirt him, but depending on how it heals and how it goes, he might be able to come back. You can play in 4 games, so maybe
absolutely. People at home, you can play 4 games and still get your redshirt. That's been a newer rule since COVID. And then Pickerington South is what I call it, Ohio University. You got AJ Miller, you got Tyson Long, Michael Taylor. Talk about some of their what you know about their camps and potential to play this season.
Yeah, they've all done a great job from what we've heard, and I think AJ's in the mix. I expect all of them to have a chance to maybe be on special teams. So I think they travel to Ohio State, I believe, this year, right?
That'd be October 3rd or September 13th, night game.
So it's a pretty cool deal to
get to play in the shoe.
Yeah.
So obviously Tyson, really I could see him maybe being a nickel, and then obviously Michael. One injury away, he's got a lot of upside. Yeah. So, all right, well, we'll go ahead and get things wrapped up on tonight's show. I'd like to thank Coach Hillridge for joining us. God knows I had 1,000,001 questions, but he was graceful enough to sit down and talk about the football program tonight. We'd also like to thank Cardo's Pizzeria and Tavern for hosting us. Be sure to pack up the car, bring the family, come to Berea on Friday night, 7 p.m. game at Baldwin Wallace. If you want to take a party bus, get some friends together, take a party bus up there. We want you there. We want you loud. We need that support. If you can't make the game, Coach Hillridge may be aware today. Spectrum TV will be carrying the game at 7 p.m. Cavs announcer Sam Michael, big name in the NBA announcing world, will be hosting the game. Baldwin Wallace, 7 p.m., the home of alumni Tim Smart, Dr. Tim Smart, chiropractor here in Pickerington. If you want to sponsor the show, let me know. And then, as always, and most importantly, remember, go North.